Okay, moving on. One of the things that people are always keen to do with their sites is to personalise them and style them in a way that suits them. In order to do that, you again go up to the More Actions menu and select Manage Site. And then you'll see that there's an option over on the left hand side called Colours and Fonts, and if you open up this this option, you'll see that you get a live preview in the centre of the page, much like you do when you're directly editing it, because you need to be able to see what your changes in this area look like on the live site. So you can see on the left hand side we've got a great big scroll bar of loads of different things that you can change which relate to specific elements on the page. Now each of these has like a header, so you have the entire page header here, and you've got things like the page background, the wrapper image, the font, and so on. Moving down, you've got things like the site header, so that corresponds to anything within this area and behind the navigation. We've then got content area, so that's anything on the page within this area here. You've then got content area gadgets, and those are things that you can add when you're editing your page. You have sidebar gadgets, which we're not using in this case, but if you do have a sidebar you can change it there. The navigation gadget. Navigation is with respect to anything that goes on behind here, or your sidebar. You've then, the last thing in the list, got horizontal navigation, so that changes how these buttons are going to look and the text in them and so on. So to give you an example, let's go and try to change the page background colour at the top. That's one that people will go straight for. So you click the option that you're looking for, and selecting the custom field will allow you to change it to any of the colours in this list. If you know anything about image editing, you can see you've got this, it's something called a hex code down the bottom here, and if you know anything about image editing, it means that you can select an exact colour using a hex code. But aside from that, you can click any of the options in the list here, so maybe I'll go for this dark red option, and then you can see that my page background changes. And if that's the only change that I wanted to make, I would click the save button at the top and go back to my intranet site there, and that would be the page colour changed. Looking at things like fonts, let's go down to our content area, for example. I'm going to select content font and go to custom again, and if I click normal, it will give you the majority of the fonts that you have on your system at this point. Now try to keep those really to the 5 or 6 listed at the top here. Those are standard fonts that are used online, and if you select a crazy font that you have on your own machine, there's no guarantee that other people will have it on theirs, so it might just refer back to one of these default fonts anyway. So keep it to the ones that people can actually read. If I wanted to change it to Georgia, for example, you can see that it changes in the window here. I'm going to put it back just to normal so that it's easily readable, and that's all you have to do. When you want to change things like sizes, let's have a look at those as well. You've got your standard sort of point system here, so it works in roughly the same way as it does in Word or something. So if I change those and made those bigger, that's fine. But remember that when people are using their web browsers, they can make the text bigger or smaller depending on whether they've got any sight issues or anything like that. The only other thing that you really want to have a look at maybe is your horizontal navigation. Down the bottom here, you can see that you have some different options in this area, so you could change the background colour of your of one of your buttons. So let's just change that like that, so you can see that it comes to this pinkish colour. But then you have a hover background colour as well, so that when somebody hovers over one of these buttons, they'll know that they can select it because it changes colour maybe. So if I go to hover background colour here and make that the a darker version, it doesn't give you the preview here, but when you save your changes, you'll be able to see the difference. I'm going to cancel these options now so that I don't lose any of the colour changes on my own site, so let's cancel that. But can you see when I hover over one of my buttons here, the colour changes like this. So experiment with the different colour and font options, put your own stamp on things, but try to ensure that people will still be able to read your site when you're finished. Okay, so the last thing I'm going to cover are the sharing options that are available to you when you're using a Google site. If you're familiar with other tools in the Google Apps suite of applications, then you may be familiar with this share button at the top here already. But if not, we'll go through and explain what the different options are now. If you're working on something like a portfolio, you may not have any reason to use this these options, because we'll have set up the portfolio for you beforehand so that only you and your tutor are able to access it. Otherwise, if you're working on a site or a type of portfolio that you want to be able to share with people after you've finished your studies maybe, then you might want to have a look at what these sharing options mean. So to access them, we can either click the share button at the top here, or if you click more and sharing and permissions here, they go to the same place. I'm going to click the share button here, and it takes you back to our sort of manage site control panel. Now, depending on which option has been selected in this area, you may or may not see this link at the top of the page. We're going to ignore that for a second and go straight to what the access options mean. So if I click the change link here, this takes you to the visibility options for your website. So the top one, public on the web, means that anybody on the internet could find or access your site. They don't need to sign in order to be able to gain access to it. It works like any other website. The second one, anyone with the link, again means that anybody can find and access your site, but they're only able to access it if you've given them the link. So you can see that's what it says there, and there's no sign-in required on either of these top two options. The two interesting ones for us, because you're students at the university and the university supplies you with an email service that's underwritten by Google, means that we have our own Sheffield Hallam University Google domain, that's what it's called, in which we operate the service. So that's why we get these two options about Sheffield Hallam University here. They effectively mean the same thing as the first two, but because they're held within that domain, you have to consider that the internet in this respect only relates to Sheffield Hallam University, and in this case you can give somebody the link, but they can only view it if they're also a member of staff or a student at the institution. The final option that you have in the list is private, and that means that only specific individuals that you give access to will be able to see your site. And the way that we go about adding those individuals to a list, if I click private and select save, is by putting their email addresses in the bottom here, clicking share and save, and then they'll be sent an email that gives them a link to your website, and they'll have to sign in order to be able to see it. One other option that you'll notice just to the right hand side of this text box here is the edit owner viewer option. So if you supply somebody, a specific individual, access to your site, you can say that you want them to be able to edit it, much in the same way that we are now, or you can say that you only want them to be able to view it, so they can't change anything but they can see what's on the site. Let's click off that, and I'm going to go back and change my option to only one with the link and save again. But those are your sharing options, and you can change them at any time you want.